All right. Well, good afternoon. It's officially afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another great Lunch and Learn. Today we have StateRamp, who's a nonprofit organization that launched in early 2021 and brings states and local governments together with the providers who serve them to recognize best practices in cloud security and a standardized approach to cloud cybersecurity verification. I have Rebecca Key and her colleague here, forgive me, Stacey Carswell is also here with her today, and they will be doing a brief presentation, kind of giving an overview of StateRamp, who they are, what they do. Let me go ahead and pull this up here. And I'm sorry, my computer's freezing now. So Stacey and Rebecca, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Of course. So I'll start first and say thank you, Bob, for the brief introduction and saying hi. We really appreciate your time. As I mentioned earlier, we both are former government employees at state and local levels, so we do understand just how much you have on your plate. And so we really, really appreciate your time today, and we're going to try to be respectful and make the most of that. My name is Rebecca Key, as I mentioned, former government employee, state and local level in procurement. So just about 20 years of work in state and local procurement. Got fortunate enough to be introduced to StateRamp and kind of put one foot over into the nonprofit side of things. As was mentioned, this is a nonprofit organization. And I'm just really proud and honored to be able to help with this initiative and to help those state and local governments that I've spent my life with and the employees and staff of those governments that make them run every day. Stacey.
Thanks, Rebecca. My name is Stacey Carswell. I am the Government Engagement Manager for StateRamp. I've been here for a short time, but most of my time I've spent in my career in local government here in New York. I've also got a very strong passion for IT. I started my career as a consultant on an IT implementation. So bringing cybersecurity and my history with procurement together was a huge requirement for me moving forward. And so that's how I ended up with StateRamp, because it just melded my two loves together. I currently work on implementations with Rebecca, and so we're really excited to share with you how we can help with any of your needs regarding cybersecurity and securing our systems. So you ready to go, Rebecca?
If Alexa's ready, I'm ready.
Okay, so welcome to you both. Just want to let you guys know, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, and Stacey, if you want to go ahead and share your screen now. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can feel free to raise your hand. We can call on you. You can come off mute and talk to Rebecca and Stacey directly. Or if you're a little shyer, it's okay. You can feel free to type your question in the chat, and either of them will address it as we go along. So without further ado, Stacey and Rebecca, take it away.
Thank you. So, as Alexa said, I'm honestly more comfortable. So please don't refrain from raising your hand or unmuting yourself and hopping in there with questions. I also, for me, I'm a little impatient. And I get stuck on ideas. So if you have a question in the moment, sometimes it's better to ask it in that moment so we can explain. So would love for this to be a conversation if you're comfortable with that, so we can make sure that we're making the most of your time and understanding. Stacey, if you'll go ahead and pull up the first slide, we'll get started. So I'm going to give you a little information about StateRamp itself for those of you who are not familiar with the concept. It is a relatively new idea, and this idea was founded with a lot of brilliant minds, both from the private sector, those suppliers that serve us, and from the governments. I don't know how many of you are familiar with a program called FedRamp, but the federal government has a risk and authorization management program, or RAMP, that they've been using for years and was recently codified for the federal government that they have to use this program. And the idea behind a risk and authorization management program is to have a way to vet those third-party suppliers that makes sense for the governments, to make sure that those that we're doing business with are actually secure. And because they're touching our networks, we really need them to be secure. Most of the research you'll find, and there's lots out there, says that the vast majority of ways that bad actors get into our government, including schools and higher ed, the way they get into our systems is generally through a third party supplier. And so the challenge is, how do we look at those suppliers and make sure that they're really doing all the things that they say they're doing? Now, my experience in procurement and in state and local government is that we ask them. In the solicitation, usually there's if IT is giving you the scope, there's a piece of paper, right, that says, here's all the things you need to do. And you have to tell us whether or not you do them, right? And that's a beautiful thing. We definitely need to ask. And that's the first step. The issue comes in that very few governments have the bandwidth to be able to take all of those things and verify them. Even when we're considering doing business with another party to help us with our work, those vendors then say yes to that because they're bidding on it. Do they really know what we mean? Are they really doing it? Are they doing it at the level we want them to? We try to check, but bandwidth is an issue. Once we've contracted with them, once they're working with us, how do we continue to check? How do we look in there and say, are these folks continuing to do this? Are they still safe? Has the system changed? Has the way we use the system changed? Who has time to check that? My experience says not a single government I've ever worked with had the staff, the time, the bandwidth to check for that. And so because some of the governments, and in fact, particularly the state of Arizona, said, we want to set up a ramp program of our own, and they did. The problem was they never had the bandwidth to do all the checking that they needed to do. And so they said, well, if every government has this problem, why don't we get together and solve this problem as one group? And that's how sort of StateRamp was born. So there's a few things we look at from a StateRamp perspective. How do we know which of our contracts is going to impact our data potentially? Which ones need to be secure? Every time we buy new lawn equipment, is it tied to our network? Probably not, but maybe, right? There's an Internet of Things now, so there are more IT threats than ever, right? Because lots of things now have services. If we're saying these folks that are responding to our solicitations are saying they meet these criteria, how do we know? I can tell you from my own experience that I've had vendors call me and say, I know my competitor is saying yes to that, and I know that's not true. Well, if I don't have the ability to check it, what can I do about that? It's terrifying. And then once we've contracted with them again, how do we know that they're staying secure? So what StateRamp did was look at everything and say, okay, there's a national standard, right? NIST puts out certain controls for certain things. And so the NIST 853 is those are the controls that most governments are looking for. Those are the controls that the FedRamp program uses for federal contracts. And so everybody kind of agreed that that was the best standard, right? And so all of our controls and our reviews are based on that standard. And we say, okay, vendors who come in to our system, we look at those, they turn in criteria, they turn in verification and validation, they get a third-party assessor who helps them through this process, and they write up a security review and they turn it into us. And we validate and verify that every single control that we're all asking them to do, that they're actually doing it. Then we turn around and say, now that you are certified, monthly, you will turn in reports and we will review those reports and we will make those reports and assessments and the artifacts with them available to the governments who participate with us. So you don't have to do the review. You don't have to do the contract administration of monitoring that constantly, right? Throughout the duration of the contract. And you have access to see all that documentation should you want to look at it. And if there's some sort of incident happening, if something's not going right, whatever that looks like, if they're just not reporting, if there's a vulnerability that they're not addressing in a timely manner, we proactively let you know by sending you an email saying, hey, something's going on with one of your products, log into this secure portal and you can see what's going on with all the products you use, and you can see what's going on with that particular one. Does that make sense? Any questions about sort of who we are, how we work? So we're a nonprofit, and a keynote, we do not charge governments for our services. So this is a free service to you. Stacey, did I miss anything?
I think you got that covered, Rebecca.
Okay. So what I didn't want to do was spend the whole time on how we work. So I've, kind of skimmed that. If you want more information, feel free to reach out to us, or our website is stateramp.org. But I think we're gonna move through some more tangible pieces and some more valuable pieces about how it might work for you and how you might utilize our services. Next slide, Stacey. So there's a question, can you identify what counties use StateRamp? So right now our focus has been on states because there are 50 of them and we can count them easily. Counting is hard. I'm in procurement. I just know which number is bigger than the other one. I don't necessarily know that much about numbers. No, but we focused on states originally because that's who kind of started this. With us. There is no county in Florida that I'm aware of that is utilizing StateRamp right now. I know the state is in talks and engaged with StateRamp to discuss how they might utilize the services with StateRamp. The state of Florida has been a participating government engaged with StateRamp since early on. You were one of the first 10 states to kind of adopt this back in 2021 or early 2022, but I'm pretty sure it was 21 when Florida came in. But you've had, as you're aware, some administrative changes and some other initiatives that have kind of delayed an implementation of StateRamp, but is certainly recognized by the state.
Thank you, Rebecca. I just wanted to ask, are there any counties anywhere in the U.S. or any cities? Yes. Okay, yes. So there are counties and there are cities that use StateRamp.
Absolutely, and we can put you in touch with some of those should you have questions about how it might work in a county. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Of course. And we are made up of boards and committees as a nonprofit, and several counties do serve on our boards and committees as well. So next slide, please. So I talked about NIST and our controls. So the NIST framework have these specific controls that really relate to cybersecurity and to making sure that our operations are covered. And so the idea with StateRamp is that instead of Broward County having one set of controls and Marion County having a different set and the state having a different set and California having their own set, is that we all use this national standard of security controls the same way. So when your vendor community comes in and does these assessments, they put it in one place and then we all have access to it. And when you're evaluating solicitations, when you're considering who to do business with, the controls are all the same. They're equal across the board, which is important for competition, which is important to be fair in how we award contracts and choose who we do business with. But it also allows them to be one and done where they can do that monthly reporting that's the same for everybody and not, again, the award and then this constant monthly reporting, which holds the costs down and is much more efficient, lets us all get back to what we're actually trying to achieve. Next slide. So we have this security framework right now. For those of you who are familiar with NIST, there is a new revision, and that is Revision 5. Revision 5 was a significant change. It has a lot of privacy controls in it. We are nearing the end of our mapping to Revision 5, and we'll switch to Revision 5 soon. Because a lot of our vendor partners do have FedRAMP as well, the federal government is still on Revision 4, and they've delayed moving to Revision 5. So we are trying to move with them to make this easier for a lot of our vendors who have both the federal government and state's RAMPS program. So I'm not sure exactly when we're going to move to Rev 5, but we are ready. So we anticipate midsummer. If the federal government continues to delay, we will most likely go ahead and move to Revision 5 because those privacy controls in Revision 5 are so important to our customers like you. We do have, if you want to see the controls and those sorts of things, they're on the website, or you can reach out to Stacey and I. We would be more than thrilled to direct you to those specific controls so you can see exactly what we're checking for and in what way we check. Next slide. Okay, so before we get into sort of the flow of how it works, any questions about the technical piece or any more questions about how we might help you or answer any questions about what you're checking for or what you would like to see? Okay, seeing none, I'll keep going. So basically, it's up to the government to require your standards, right? We have different levels of certifications and approvals and things like that. So you could stop at any level. You could require certain things on one contract and something different on another, but our standards remain the same. So we can work with you. And the reason I brought Stacey with me today is because we have teams of folks that help the governments understand what we do offer so that they can craft a solution that works for them. It's even though the controls are a one size fits all, it's a national standard that most of us already sort of use anyway. But we know that every government is different. And so, and referring to Dugan, I think I've heard Dugan say more than once, if you know one county government, you know one county government, because we all do things differently. And I think at the local level, it's even more so, because we need to be flexible. We don't have the luxury of waiting to move, right? Our clients need what they need. Our customers and citizens need what they need today. And so we're expected to move and turn a little more quickly. And therefore, I think we have very different needs and very different procedures. So you decide how you want to use StateRamp services. It's not something we dictate to you. So that's often a question we get is, do we have to require it on everything? Do we have to do this? Do we have to do that? You do whatever works for you. We have recommendations of how we think it should work. We can tell you what we're seeing in other governments. We can put you in touch with those governments so that you can talk to them about how they're using it. But it's really up to you to decide how you want to use the services that are available to you. Once you have those standards out there, your vendor community then will be asked to meet those standards, right? So we can help you. We have an entire team, not Stacey and I, of dozens of individuals who literally go out and work with your vendors to understand what you're asking for and help them achieve whatever standard you've chosen. If the standard is going to be a full certification, we have 2 levels, ready and authorized, and we can explain that later if you guys are interested, certainly if you're interested in using the services. But ready basically is those minimum mandatory controls, and authorized is you meet all the controls. The vendor must have an independent audit. To go through that, and these independent auditors, we use the same ones that the federal government uses. They have to be accredited, and they have to work with that vendor to get these initial assessments done. Once those initial assessments are done, they are sent to StateRamp. We have a program management office, or a PMO, that we use to review all of those requirements and those assessments to make sure that we are satisfied that they are really meeting those requirements. And there's only one program management office, so it comes through StateRamp, it's consistent. And if they're all held to the same standard, once those come through us and we say, yes, we believe they are ready, then it goes through either a government sponsor. So a government has to sign off to say, yes, we believe this as well. Or it goes to our approvals committee, and that approvals committee says, yes, we agree. The reason we do that is, as a nonprofit, what we're saying is these folks are ready to do business with you, government. They are meeting the NIST controls. We validated, we verified that. Because it's for you, we want to make sure that government, state and local government, is signing off on our work, right? To make sure that we're really meeting your standard. So if you have somebody in particular that you're using, it's really important to you, you can be the person we send all that documentation to and say, I agree with what you've done. Thank you. They're good to go. Or if you don't want to mess with that, or a vendor isn't doing business with the government right now, but wants to achieve this, then it goes to an approvals committee, which is made up exclusively of state and local governments. Then it moves into the phase, once it's authorized or ready, into this continuous monitoring phase is what we call it. And what that is those monthly reports that come into us where we look at their vulnerabilities, we look at what they're doing. If there's significant change, they've merged, they've added a module, something like that, they may be asked to do another assessment to make sure that nothing has changed and they're still meeting those controls. So we take care of all that for you, but you have access to see those items. And then based on what you find and based on our different service levels, you make the decision about who you want to do business with. Certainly, we would recommend that you always build in some sort of exception. If you're going to say everybody has to be the utmost, they have to meet every control, they have to be fully authorized, well, that might create a little bit of a barrier to entry. You might want to have a little more ramp for folks who don't have that yet, because as a county, you probably do a lot of business with more local vendors or traditionally underutilized vendors. And we have a process to help them through the assessment so that they're an equal competitor. And not, if they don't have contracts with the federal government already, or they don't have contracts in multiple states, this may be new to them. So keep in mind that we do have a program to kind of get them through that process. The average time of vendor review through the committee. So the committee usually takes, I think do they meet weekly, Stacey, or monthly? Monthly. So a month, depending on when they enter that time, it could be up to a month. And the review, once the assessments come to StateRamp, is 4 to 6 weeks. And that includes all of the review that we do, the back and forth and the questions and making sure it's good. Then it's sent to that committee. So if you get sent to that committee the week before they meet, it could be a week. If you have the luck of getting everything through and approved the day after they meet, it could be a month, but we're not talking years like it can be with the federal program. Does that answer your question, Constance? I hope I did. If I didn't, feel free to unmute and let me know. Questions about just the overview of the process?
Yeah, I had a question about the standards. Is it a, standard set of standards or questions or requirements that the vendors have?
It is.
Okay.
It is. So now they have the option to do their turn in their templates a little bit differently. We give sample templates for them. If they're already FedRamp, they're the same set of controls, so they don't have to do our templates. They can turn in what they've done for FedRamp and just not do it again, right? Because it's the same controls, but it is a set of controls from NIST 853. And again, we have ready and authorized. So we look at different controls on those 2 steps. And then we also have a snapshot program for those vendors who've never done StateRamp before and don't have those kinds of assessments, to answer just a set of the really most basic questions so they can get an initial
score. I saw the snapshot on the website. Is that something that the vendors do? Or is that something that buyers do? Like if we gave you a vendor.
Yeah, it's something that the vendors actually do. If you gave me a vendor and said we'd like to have a snapshot, we could reach out to them and help them achieve that snapshot.
Okay.
Basically, if you're familiar with Dun & Bradstreet, it's kind of a cyber Dun & Bradstreet piece. What happens is, instead of hiring that third-party assessor and going through all the NIST controls, there's a set of those minimum controls, that the most important controls that we've pulled out and said, okay, these are the most important, the most critical. And then we ask the vendor, do you or do you not do this? And if they say yes, they meet with our program management office and they have to show evidence that they've done that in order to get the points. And each control is assigned a set of points, and these are available on our website, so we can share those with you.
Thank you. Do they get a badge, or those are published somewhere? Or
for the snapshot, they actually get a score.
Okay.
And so you'd be able to see what their score was and compare apples to apples was the idea. For the snapshot, the providers asked us not to share their scores, but to allow them to share them, and we can just confirm them. Because if they come do the snapshot to see where they are as a gap analysis to being authorized, if they score really lowly, they might not want to share that with you. They might want to wait to bid on something until they've increased their score a bit. So we said okay to that. Now they do have the option, if you've asked for it, to share it with you, that we would be allowed to share it with you. For ready and authorized, we actually publish a list. They do get a badge, and we publish a list of those for you so you could see. You could also work through us to say, here's our list. Can you tell us who has or hasn't got snapshots? And then we could make a request for those scores and who is or is not certified. But yes, it's a standard set of controls. And Stacey, if you'll make a note, we'll share those with you after this presentation, the link to all those different controls so you can see exactly what we're asking for. Next slide, please. And perfect timing, because this is the list of authorized products. So if somebody, a vendor, has a product, and we do this by product, not by vendor, because some vendors have lots and lots of products, and the security controls may vary. I know for me, when I go to some of the bigger conferences, I will see vendors who have banners that say, we are FedRamp authorized. I hope someday to see ones that say, we are StateRamp authorized. That would be one of them in IGP. We're registering for that now. You'll see that from the vendors. And a question for you would be, well, which products are? Because not all products are authorized. It's done by product, both at the federal and state level. So it's about the product, and they do have different security controls. So you can see a list of our products, whether they're ready, whether they're authorized. There's also another list that says progressing. So you can see what products and vendors are working with us to get those products to that point, if you want to see those. And that is public. If you just go to our homepage, stateramp.org, scroll down a little bit, there's a button that says authorized product list, and you can see those products that are already ready or authorized. Next slide. Continuous monitoring, again, we touched on this, so I'll slide through this very quickly, but we do the monthly reporting to the governments. You have access to go see those. They're in a secure portal. So once you become a participating government, again, that costs you nothing. You can go in and see and have access to that portal so that the products that you're using, and you'll only have access to the products you've requested. So you don't have to thumb through tons of products. It's just the products that you're using. And we do, because it's confidential and proprietary information often, and could lead to other things. So it's in a secure portal to keep it secure. And the vendors do have to grant you access to be able to see that. We take care of that process for you. You don't have to do a thing except tell us who you want access to. Next slide. Snapshot, we touched on that a little bit. It's basically, again, an objective score based on those most critical controls. If somebody is not yet authorized, but you want or need to do business with them, we can tell you where they stand with respect to those controls. And you can see that through a score if you wanted to set a minimum score that you're comfortable doing business with. And then we have something called snapshot progressing snapshot, where those that are working with governments, a lot of the governments we're working with are saying, hey, it's great to have a snapshot, but we also want a plan for you to become StateRamp certified. So the StateRamp Progressing program allows them to subscribe to that snapshot where they get free consulting, and we help them get through the process to become authorized. And you, as a government who uses that product, then have visibility through the process as to how they're progressing. One of the concerns with the snapshot is if I use it in the solicitation to help me make a decision about their cybersecurity maturity as I choose a partner, and I tell them I want them to become authorized, what happens? What happens if they don't do it? I don't look at it again until the time of renewal and they haven't done anything. I want to know before that. And so we set up the progressing program to allow you to monitor their progress toward becoming ready or authorized, so that you're not surprised at time of renewal that they haven't done something in that direction. Next slide. Basically, if you want to use it in the procurement process, we tell you, decide what level you want somebody to be. You can require snapshot at the time of solicitation, so you can take it into consideration when you're choosing a product, if they're not already certified, but you're still interested in doing business with them, they can get this snapshot in weeks. We guarantee it within 3 weeks after they've turned in their paperwork to us. We believe we can get it sooner, but we told them 3 weeks. We also have a place for them to enter. Are they responding to a solicitation where this is required? And if so, when is that due and what's the jurisdiction? So we can make sure that we prioritize these and get them back to them so it's not delaying their proposal. Next slide. All right, questions about how the system sort of works. We wanted to give you a little picture of who we were. Then we also wanted to give you a little picture of how it might work as you're trying to figure out maybe how you might use these services and include them in what you're already doing for cybersecurity. Different governments do it different ways. Different governments, come on board in phases or iteratively. Sometimes people just pull the trigger and do it all the way. So it's really up to the government, but we do have ideas about what most governments are doing. So we like to share those a little bit so you can kind of get in your mind how you might use those. If nobody has questions for me, oh, I see somebody. Question?
Thanks so much, Rebecca and Stacey.
Sure.
If you could get with me offline, maybe provide me some contact information with other municipalities and counties that use StateRamp. I'd
Yes,
like
sir.
to chat with them peer to peer and
Yes,
sort of understand their ways and processes.
absolutely.
And I appreciate that. Thanks.
Of course. Yes, sir. We can do that.
I'll leave it open for questions from others, and I'll turn it back over to Alexa. I guess Q&A time. Is it? I don't know.
We have a little bit more if we have time, just as a comparison to other assessments, but would love to stop here and do some Q&A if there is any to address this piece, if that's okay.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now, Rebecca, so if you want to go ahead and continue, you have probably about another 10 minutes.
Okay.
And I would just add, thank you, Alexa, just for the benefit. So the audience here, we have purchasing people in the audience. We have purchasing people who don't buy IT. We have purchasing people who do buy IT. And then we have some of our using agencies, some of their IT sections. So we've got some of the people who work in
Awesome.
Information technology throughout the county here. So just so you know. Thanks.
Perfect. Do you have is there anybody that offers like health services, those sorts of things that generally is used to using HITRUST and that sort of piece for your HIPAA compliance?
I'll leave it to our audience to say.
Well, just a note, if you're used to using HITRUST, you run into that piece. And one of the concerns with both StateRamp and HITRUST was that it'd be nice to have both, but we don't want to tax our vendors with too much. So we have developed a fast track program with HITRUST. We cover some of the same things, and then there are controls that we don't cover. So what we've done together is develop a gap analysis. So with StateRamp, there's a yearly assessment. With HITRUST, it's every 2 years, and then HITRUST doesn't do continuous monitoring. So there are some aspects of StateRamp that are different. On the StateRamp controls, we'll still do that, right? It'll still be truly StateRamp. But for those controls that overlap, those won't have to be reassessed by a third-party assessor. And the reciprocity goes both ways. So there's reciprocity with review for the common controls, and they only have to go through the process either for HITRUST or StateRamp for those controls that are outside the communal controls, if that makes sense. So if you're used to that piece, that's a great new development for vendors. And for those of us who are worried about the HIPAA piece, to Mr. Gleason's point, if you are not buying IT, I would warn you, and I'm sure many of you have done, I have done it. I often apologize to the IT folks in the room. So I apologize for what I have done to you. Oftentimes, when a procurement comes through, I don't recognize that there's a technology component. I don't realize that it's touching the network, or the way it's proposed to be used, it's not. And then later, there's a new module, there's a new service we want to take advantage of. It's not new, but it's new to us, or it wasn't really talked about in the proposal, but it does actually touch the network. So what we see, the vast majority of governments we work with doing, putting a term and condition, if applicable, into the standard terms and conditions and even POs, that if you're touching our network, if it's determined that you could impact data that we've considered confidential, you would have to go through this process and work with us so that we're not renegotiating contracts should something come up in the future. But because of the Internet of Things, there are so many things that we are used to having no IT component that now have a component of some sort, right? HVAC units, elevators, things like that are now touching our network and have been for quite some time. And the bad actors are figuring out that that's a nice way in. The big Target breach, it's probably been 10 years now, right, Stacey? Where they came and got everybody's credit cards, debit cards right before Christmas. That came through their HVAC vendor. The Equifax breach not so long ago that kind of got us all, that came through an outsourced customer complaint portal. Burlington Coat Factory got one through their Wi-Fi, their public Wi-Fi. So there's lots of threats out there that we don't see as IT, right? I was used to doing the procurement thing, right? We use the NIGP code. If it's not coded as one of those IT sections, it doesn't come to IT. I even set up my e-procurement system that way. But the reality is there's a lot of items that aren't IT that could impact our systems. And so that's a scary kind of idea. And so what we're doing in most places is going ahead, and even if we don't think there's an IT component, we're going ahead and putting it into the standard terms and conditions that are used across the board. And then more details and more specifics in our IT purchases, obviously, to say, hey, if it's at any point this becomes an issue, you're going to agree to do this to us. Otherwise, at the time we realize it, then we have to open back up a contract to renegotiate it. Most of us, one, don't have the bandwidth, and two, it doesn't often go our way. We lose a little leverage when they're already a partner. So thinking about how that impacts those technically non-IT purchases is also a consideration for the governments we assist. Other questions? So Stacey, I think I used like 3 of your 5, but Stacey's put together some comparisons of other assessments that I think there's enough information for you to read on your own. So Stacey,
Yes.
you can kind of show them what's in there.
Great. So StateRamp is a distant cousin of FedRamp. We are still based on NIST 853. We do still require independent audits, but there are some key differences where StateRamp offers a bit more flexibility. Our mission is to improve your cyber posture. However, we make this available to all providers, regardless of whether or not they have a contract or the amount of their contract. It's available to all providers. And when they submit this documentation for their proof and verification, that documentation is made available to you, which with FedRamp, it's only available to federal government organizations. So a question that we've gotten is, if I already have a SOC 2, we already require SOC 2, well, why do StateRamp? And the decision factor comes from who has made that framework. SOC 2 is based on a framework that was created by CPAs, where StateRamp is based on NIST 853, which was made by cybersecurity professionals. So they're focused on the financials. We're focused on the security purely. So the next slide, I'll be brief because we're gonna cruise right on through here. Basically outlines what security controls does the SOC 2 cover. And it covers about 14.8%, whereas StateRamp covers the full 100%. And the audits are the same all the time. Like Rebecca said, we're giving you an apples to apples comparison. And when these providers come and they get their verification status, they don't have to go through every single entity's process of verifying their security. They do it one time and it covers them all 50 states or participating states, counties, locals, tribals. And so that's one of the things that we love about StateRamp. Another thing is you'll see that the SOC 2 framework is not a control catalog. This is open to interpretation. It takes away that standardization that we're looking for, because that standardization helps us across the board and providers across the board. We want this to always be a win-win situation. And so here are some examples of differing requirements between SOC 2 and StateRamp. And we're going to send these slides after this presentation, so you'll have this to refer back to. But if at any time you have any questions, always feel free to email me or Rebecca. We're always here to help. And here is another example of SOC 2. But here, this slide, I love colors. I'm a colorful person. I'm very visual. But I like to see, what is the benefit? So SOC 2 only requires a 4-digit password. StateRamp, it would take somebody who has kept to these controls. It would take somebody 3,000 years based on StateRamp's requirements to hack into your system. And so this image I love because it's very visual, and it's easy for anybody to understand. Hey, somebody can get into my account in this amount of time. I need that 438 trillion years. Please just never hack me.
And I love this slide too, because it's really an example of the difference, right? SOC 2 is not a set of controls. So the vendor who's doing the SOC 2 assessment can set what controls you look at. So if I'm applying for a job, I'm not going to give you references and information about people that don't like me, where I didn't do well. I'm going to give you, the people who like me, who I think will say good things about me. And so the ability to kind of switch to the things that I want you to see is a very different aspect than saying, here is a control. You either meet it or you don't. And those controls were developed by the experts. And that's why they change, because technology change and threats change. And I don't have the ability, as the person who's going through this assessment, as your partner, to decide which of those controls I'm going to meet and which ones I'm going to show you, and to what extent I either am meeting the control or I am not. And this gives you ability to see that and know that, and then make your business decision based on the knowledge that you know, not bits of knowledge that I've chosen to give you.
Absolutely. So who is...
I think we're out of time.
We're out of time? Okay.
Well, I just wanted to pop in. We are at 12:44 of our 45 minutes, but for those of you guys, if you want to stay on, you're free to stay on. If Rebecca and Stacey want to continue their presentation, just wanted to let everyone know that we're about at 12:40. Well, we're at 12:45 now. So if you have any burning questions that you want to ask before you hang up with us, you can feel free to do so now. We can pause there. And if you have a little bit more time, not sure how much more of the presentation you have, Rebecca, probably about another 5 minutes. Okay.
And
So,
even less, really. Yeah.
So feel free to hang out.
Yep. Stacey. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Next slide. I think it's just sort of some of our strategic partners and StateRamp members. So you can see we have participating governments. This is an older slide. We have more than this now, but we have partnered with a lot of folks to try to help meet the needs of our governments and get feedback from governments about what you need. We are also here to help as much as needed with anything that you want to do. We know you don't have folks sitting around twiddling thumbs waiting to do work. So if it's something that we can do for you, offer standard language so that you just tweak it, help develop and even provide vendor education, internal stakeholder education, whatever you need. Membership. You can become a member as an individual online with your government. There's no T's and C's to click through. So legal and procurement are going to get in there. You're signing up yourself to basically get a newsletter and an occasional email going, hey, you want to be a part of StateRamp? Hey, you want to know more? So that you can keep on top of the newsletters and notifications of blogs and things like that. If you wish to join as an institution, just contact one of us. We will help get you with the right people to get you in. You cannot accidentally sign up Broward County online. That's something that we want to make sure everybody knows what's going on and that we've done all the right things. And we do have a memorandum of understanding that we want to be signed before we start giving you access to vendors' proprietary information. And memberships for your vendor community, it's $500 a year for them to be a member. And in order to go through Snapshot or Ready Authorized, any of that stuff, they do have to be a member. And it's per organization per year for them. That's it. Questions? Stacey, I'm sorry I took up the whole time with my big mouth.
So I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat. We want to go ahead and thank you to both of you so much for coming and presenting on StateRamp, who you are, what you do. As I stated before, this presentation was recorded. So for those of you who are online, if there are any other agencies or entities within Broward County that you feel would benefit from this presentation, feel free to share it. After this presentation, Rebecca and Stacey will send a copy of the slides, and we will send that out to you guys, as well as with a link to our Lunch and Learn playlist that you can go ahead and watch it, share the link to that. There are also some really cool videos that we've recorded in the past, and feel free to check those out as well. So without further ado, special thanks to Rebecca, special thanks to Stacey. Thank you guys so much for coming and talking to us virtually at one of our Lunch and Learns, and we look forward to continuing to communicate with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.